The sound didn't belong at that table. It came too fast, too sharp, too clean. A hand cutting through the air and landing before the room had time to understand what was happening. My father's hand. Across my face. The impact didn't knock me out of my chair. It didn't send anything flying. It didn't create chaos. It did something worse. It stayed contained. The plate in front of me shifted slightly. The fork tapped against porcelain. The glass near my hand trembled, then settled. Everything moved just enough to confirm it had happened, but not enough to turn it into a scene anyone could hide inside. No one stood up. No one shouted. No one said his name. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the pain, the stillness. Because in normal families, something like that breaks the room open. Someone intervenes. Someone reacts. Someone tries to fix it, even badly. Here. It closed the room. My head had turned from the impact. I brought it back slowly, not touching my face, not checking for anything, not giving anyone the satisfaction of seeing me confirm damage. I looked at him. He was still leaning forward, still holding the posture of the strike. Like part of him hadn't caught up yet. "What did you just say?" he asked. His voice was controlled, measured. That made it worse. Because this wasn't a loss of control. This was enforcement. I opened my mouth to answer, not to repeat what I said, to decide what this moment was going to become. Then I heard it. A laugh. Not loud. Not explosive. Just wrong. I turned my head. My sister, Lila. Her hand hovered near her mouth, like she had almost tried to stop it and then decided not to. Her eyes met mine, and she didn't look away. That was the moment, not the slap. The laugh. 5 minutes earlier, nothing had felt unstable. That's how these moments always begin, not with tension. With normality, that's just slightly misaligned. The table was set the way it always was when my father wanted things to feel official. Plates aligned, cutlery placed precisely. Documents stacked near his seat instead of the center. That detail mattered, because it meant this wasn't a discussion. It was a presentation. Ownership papers, the house, the land, a structure that had existed longer than any of the conversations happening around it. "I think it's time we finalize this," he had said. Not suggested, not asked. Declared. Lila had nodded before I spoke. That also mattered, because it meant this had been discussed already, just not with me. "I'm not signing anything tonight," I said. That was the first disruption, not aggressive, not emotional, just misaligned with the direction they had already decided. My father didn't react immediately. He adjusted the stack of papers, straightened the top sheet, then looked at me. "You've had time to review it." "I have." "And?" "I don't agree with it." That was the real beginning, not disagreement. Refusal, because disagreement invites negotiation. Refusal demands change. The documents weren't complicated. That's what made them dangerous. Everything clean, everything simplified, everything framed as fairness, equal split, shared management, joint decisions. On paper, it looked balanced. In practice, it wasn't, because control doesn't come from percentages. It comes from alignment. And they were aligned. I wasn't. That meant every Piaget's shared decision would become 2 against 1. Every discussion would become pressure. Every agreement would become expectation. "I want a clean split," I said. That was the sentence that changed everything. My father leaned back slightly. Lila's posture shifted, not surprised, alert. "You mean what?" she asked. "I mean separation," I said. "No shared management, no joint ownership, no approval loops." Silence. Then Lila smiled. Small. Controlled. "That's not how this works." "It is if we make it work that way." My father tapped the paper. "That's not what your grandfather intended." There it was, the past, always used as leverage when the present doesn't cooperate. "I'm not my grandfather," I said. That was the second disruption, and that's when the room changed. "You don't get to rewrite this," my father said. "I'm not rewriting anything," I replied. "I'm stepping out of it." "That's not an option." "It is. You're making this complicated." "No," I said. "I'm making it clear." Lila laughed softly, not fully, not yet, just enough to signal where she stood. "You think you're smarter than this," she said. "No," I said. I think I'm responsible for my own share. That's not how families work." "That's exactly how they should." That was the third disruption, and that's when my father moved. Not suddenly, not wildly, deliberately. His chair shifted, his hand came up, and then the sound. The sting on my face registered late. Not because it wasn't real, because something else arrived first. Clarity, not emotional, structural. Everything rearranged in one instant. This was no longer a disagreement, no longer a negotiation, no longer a family discussion. This was hierarchy, enforced, physically. I looked at him. Then at Lila, still smiling, still not looking away. "You deserved that," she said. Quiet, certain. That sentence did more damage than the slap, because it explained it, justified it, normalized it. My father didn't correct her, didn't say her name, didn't say anything. That was the confirmation. There's a moment after something like that happens where the room waits. Not for truth, for behavior. They expect something. Anger, shock, retaliation, emotion. Anything they can recognize, anything they can control. I didn't give them that. I picked up my glass, took a sip, set it back down. That was the first controlled action after the impact, and it disrupted everything. "What?" my father said. I didn't answer. "What's wrong with you?" Lila added. I looked at the papers, not at them, at the structure, at the thing this was really about. And I understood something I should have understood earlier. This wasn't about inheritance. It was about control disguised as continuity. "I'm not signing this," I said. My voice didn't change. That mattered. "You're not walking away from this," my father replied. "I already did." Silence. Then Lila laughed again, louder this time. "Go ahead," she said. "See how far that gets you." I stood up. Slowly, no rush, no anger, that was the real break. Because standing up without reacting is not withdrawal. It's separation. "Sit down," my father said. I didn't. That was the second controlled refusal, and it shifted the room permanently. I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair. Not fast, not slow, just final. That was the difference. Speed looks emotional. Deliberate movement looks decided. "Sit down," my father said again. His voice was lower now. Not louder. Lower. Like he was trying to bring the room back under control without admitting it had slipped. I didn't look at him. That was important. Eye contact would have turned it into a contest, and I wasn't competing anymore. I was exiting. Behind me, I heard Lila shift in her chair. "You're really doing this?" she asked. I paused, just long enough to make the answer land. "Yes." Not loud, not aggressive, just done. That one word carried everything the argument hadn't been able to resolve, because arguments keep things alive. Decisions end them. I walked to the door. Each step felt measured, not heavy, not dramatic, but intentional enough that I could feel the room reacting to it. My father stood up. That was new. The chair legs scraped against the floor, louder than the slap had been. "Don't walk away from me," he said. That sentence used to work. Not because of fear, because of habit. Years of stopping when told. Years of explaining. Years of staying inside the conversation even when it wasn't going anywhere. I opened the door. That was the third refusal, not verbal, physical. "You don't get to leave like this," he said. I stepped outside. That was the fourth. Before the door closed, Lila said it. "Go cry somewhere else." I stopped. Not because it hurt, because I needed to confirm something. I turned slightly, not fully, just enough to see her. She was leaning back in her chair, relaxed, smiling, not angry, not defensive, comfortable. That told me everything. She wasn't reacting to the situation. She had already defined it. In her version, I was the one who lost control. The one who couldn't handle pressure. The one who walked away. And in that version, she was safe. That was the final confirmation. This wasn't repairable inside that house. Not with conversation, not with time, not with effort, only with distance. The door closed behind me. Soft, no slam. That mattered, because this wasn't anger. It was separation. The night air felt colder than it should have, not because of temperature, because the shift had already happened internally. Inside the house, I had a role. Outside, I had none. That was both terrifying and clean. I walked down the driveway, didn't look back. That was the fifth decision. Don't check if they're watching. Don't check if they followed. Don't check if anything changed, because turning around keeps you connected. And I needed distance. The pain on my face settled into something dull, manageable. Background. What stayed in the front was something else. Not anger, not shock. Structure. That was the word. Everything had shifted from emotional to structural in less than 30 seconds. Slap, hierarchy, laugh, confirmation. Silence, pattern. That was the chain. And once you see the structure, you can't go back to pretending it's just emotion. I reached my car, opened the door, sat inside, didn't start the engine. That pause mattered, because once I moved, things would escalate. I took out my phone, unlocked it, scrolled, stopped at one name. Evan. I didn't hesitate. I called. He picked up on the second ring. Rowan? I need to start a partition action. Silence. Then, what happened? I looked at my reflection in the dark window. There was a mark forming. Not dramatic, but visible. Enough. They made it simple, I said. That was all he needed. Are you safe? He asked. Yes. Anyone else there? Yes. Witnesses? Yes. Good. That word again. Good. Not because of what happened, because of what could be done with it. That's when it fully shifted. This wasn't a family issue anymore. It was a legal situation. And legal situations don't care about tone. They care about evidence. When can you come in? He asked. Tomorrow morning. Bring everything. I will. I ended the call, and just like that, the next phase started. Are you safe? He asked. Yes, they care. Started. That was immediate. Return. Cut. I was everything. And started. Not out. The bill didn't touch. Same. And that was the shift. Legal removes context that doesn't serve structure. Dinner, I said. Documents on the table. What kind of documents? Inheritance, joint ownership. He nodded. Then, I refused to sign. Why? I wanted a clean split. He wrote that down. Not the emotion. The position. That's how law works. It translates people into statements that can be used later. Then, my father struck me. Pause. Open hand? Yes. Where? Left side. Any visible mark? Yes. Photograph? No. That was mistake number 2. He didn't react strongly, just wrote it down. Take one next time, he said. Next time. That word sat there, not dramatic, just expected, because patterns repeat unless they're interrupted. And witnesses? He asked. My sister. And her reaction? She laughed. He stopped writing for half a second, then continued. That mattered. Not emotionally, strategically, because now the event wasn't isolated. It had reinforcement. Did you leave immediately? He asked. Yes. Any communication after? I hesitated. That matters, he said. I called my uncle. He nodded once. What did you say? I told him what happened. And his response? He said I pushed it too far. Evan leaned back slightly. That's not ideal. I know. That was the second mistake. Not because I told someone, because I told the wrong system. Family protects structure, not truth. Now there was already a narrative forming, and it wasn't mine. Here's what we do, Evan said. He turned his screen slightly, pulled up a template, partition filing, clean, direct. No emotion, no story, just structure. You want separation? Yes. This is how you force it. He pointed at sections: ownership breakdown, asset division, legal triggers, buyout conditions. This removes shared control, he said. That's the point. It also removes protection. I looked at him. Meaning? Once this starts, everything becomes transactional. Good, that's what I needed. Because emotional systems had already failed. Are you prepared for the outcome? He asked. Yes. Financially? Pause. That was the real question. Not whether I wanted it, whether I could survive it. Mostly, I said. He didn't react. Mostly isn't a number. I can handle it. For how long? That question again. Time. Everything comes back to time. Long enough, I said. He nodded, not convinced, but not stopping. That's your risk, he said. Not warning, assignment. Once we file, he said, you don't control the pace anymore. How fast? Fast enough to disrupt them. Good, that's what I needed. Not revenge, leverage. File it, I said. No hesitation. That was the 9th decision, and it was the real one. Everything before this was set up. The next 48 hours felt empty, not calm, not tense, just suspended, because nothing visible was happening, and that's where most people break. They confuse silence with inactivity. But in legal processes, silence is movement. Behind doors, on paper, in systems that don't announce themselves. I didn't contact my family. That was decision 10. No explanation, no warning, no negotiation, because anything I said would be used to reshape the narrative. By the second day, I started hearing things, indirectly. A cousin texted, "Are you okay?" That wasn't concern. That was information gathering. "I'm fine," I replied. "What happened?" "Nothing you need to be involved in." Short, closed, no detail. That was important, because information spreads through families faster than facts. And I wasn't feeding it. My father called. I didn't answer. That was decision 11. He left a voicemail. "Call me back." Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "We need to talk." Just instruction. That told me everything. He still believed he controlled the structure. I almost called back. Almost. Because habit is strong. Because closure feels necessary. Because silence feels rude. But silence is also power, when used correctly. So I didn't call. 3 days later, Evan called. "It's filed." "When?" "Today." "Service?" "Already scheduled." That was it. No countdown, no warning, just execution. 2:17 p.m. That time mattered. Because it wasn't dramatic. Not evening, not night, middle of the day, normal. That's when systems hit hardest, when people aren't prepared, when they're still inside routine. The process server knocked. My father answered. Signed, closed the door, opened the envelope, read. Once, twice. Then sat down. That image stayed with me because it mirrored mine. Same chair, same table, same shift, but opposite direction. He called me that night. I answered. Not immediately, but I answered. "What is this?" he asked. Not angry, confused. That was new. "It's separation," I said. "You're destroying this family." "No," I said. "I'm defining it." Silence. Longer this time. Then, "You're overreacting." "No," I said. I'm responding correctly." That was the end of the conversation. Not emotionally, structurally. By the time I hung up, everything had changed. Not because of the slap, not because of the argument, because of the filing. That's when it became real. The first response didn't come from my father. It came from Lila. That told me everything. She called in the middle of the afternoon. Not that night, not after thinking, immediately. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I answered. Not because I wanted to, because timing matters. Too fast looks reactive. Too slow looks afraid. "Are you serious?" she said. No greeting, no setup, just challenge. "Yes." Silence. Then a short laugh. The same one. Lighter this time, but still there. "You actually filed something?" "Yes." You think this is going to do anything? That was her mistake, not understanding scale, because she was still thinking emotionally. Argument, power play, temporary reaction. She hadn't shifted into structure yet. It already did, I said. What does that even mean? It means it's not a conversation anymore. Pause. That landed, because she heard the difference. Not what I said, what I removed. You're blowing this out of proportion, she said. There it was. Minimize, reduce, return to normal. That's one version, I replied. It's the correct version. No, I said, it's the convenient one. Silence, then. You're acting like something serious happened. I didn't answer immediately. That mattered, because delay forces the other person to hear their own words. He hit you, she added, like it was nothing, like it needed clarification, not weight. And you laughed, I said. That was the first time I said it out loud, directly, to her. Pause, longer this time. That's not the point, she said. That was the confirmation, because when someone tells you something isn't the point, it usually is. You're going to tear everything apart over one moment, she asked. One moment? I repeated. Yes. That wasn't one moment. What was it then? Pattern. That word shifted the frame. Because moments can be forgiven, patterns have to be addressed. You're being dramatic, she said. No, I said. I'm being precise. That line ended the emotional argument, not because it convinced her, because it removed her leverage. You think you're going to win this? She asked. I'm not trying to win. Then what are you doing? I'm separating. That word again. Same reaction, different tone. You don't get to just walk away with your share like this, she said. Yes, I said. I do. Not without consequences. There it was, threat, not explicit, but present. What kind? I asked. Silence. She didn't answer, because she didn't have one yet. That mattered. By evening, more calls. Different numbers, same tone, concern that sounded like alignment. You need to slow down. This isn't the way to handle it. Families work things out. Every sentence had the same structure. Return, contain, normalize. None of them asked what happened. They asked why I reacted. That told me everything. The narrative had already been built, not around the action, around my response. This time, I didn't respond. That was decision 12. No explanations, no defense, no correction. Because correcting narratives inside a system that created them doesn't work. It just feeds it. 2 days later, my father tried again. Different approach. He showed up. That mattered. Because now it wasn't distance, it was presence. He stood outside my door, knocked once, waited. I opened. That was decision 13. Allow contact, but controlled. He didn't step inside. That mattered, because he understood something had changed. This doesn't need to go further, he said. First sentence, no greeting, no apology, just containment. It already has, I said. You can withdraw it. No. Pause. You're making a mistake. That's your position. Not defensive, not reactive, just separate. He looked at me, longer this time, then said, I shouldn't have hit you. That was it. No expansion, no explanation, no ownership beyond the act itself. That mattered, because it wasn't repair, it was acknowledgement, minimal, strategic. And? I asked. He frowned slightly. And what? That's it? What else do you want? There it was, the limit, apology as transaction, not understanding. I had a choice, accept it, slow everything down, return to negotiation, or continue. That was the 14th decision, and it mattered more than the filing, because this was where most people stop. They take partial repair. Call it enough. Go back, and nothing actually changes. I want separation, I said. That's what this is. That's extreme. No, I said, that's accurate. He looked past me, into the room, at the desk, the papers, the structure, then back at me. And something shifted. Not agreement, recognition. He understood I wasn't reacting anymore. I had already moved. "You're serious," he said. "Yes." That was the first time he said it like a fact, not a challenge. "This will cost you," he said. "I know. More than you think." "I know." Pause, then, "You're still doing it." Same sentence, different tone. Now it wasn't pressure, it was observation. "Yes," I said. He nodded once, not approval, not agreement, just acknowledgement. Then he left. No argument, no escalation. That was important, because it meant he had shifted from control to consequence. The next week, their lawyer reached out. Formal, polished, controlled. Proposal for internal resolution. Keep it in the family, avoid court, maintain structure. That was the final trap, because it sounded reasonable. It always does. But keep it in the family really means keep it inside the system that created the problem. I declined. That was decision 15. And that one closed everything. At that point, there was no going back. Not emotionally, not structurally, not legally. Only forward. The house didn't sell quickly. That surprised everyone. Not because it wasn't valuable, because timing doesn't care about family breakdowns. It went on the market 2 weeks after the filing moved into the phase where nobody could pretend it wasn't real anymore. Photos were taken. Furniture was staged in a way that made it look like no one had ever argued inside those walls. The table where everything started was cleared, polished, and centered under better lighting. The same table, different story. Buyers walked through on Saturdays, shoes off, voices lowered. They commented on the layout, the natural light, the sense of stability. That word again, it showed up everywhere, just not where it mattered. I didn't attend the first showing. That was decision 16. Distance isn't just physical, it's selective presence. My father stayed for the first 2, stood in the garage, answered questions about the roof, the plumbing, the electrical updates he had documented over the years in a binder that had nothing to do with this ending and everything to do with the kind of man he believed himself to be. Lila didn't stay. She didn't like strangers in the house. That was new. Because for years she had been the one most comfortable performing normalcy for people outside the family. Now, normal required effort, and effort reveals cracks. The first offer came in lower than expected. That created tension. Not between me and them, between them and reality. Because reality doesn't respect narratives. It respects numbers. "We should wait," my father said on the call with the agent. "We can get more." The agent didn't argue, just said, "You can try." That's what professionals say when they know the answer and understand that people need to arrive at it themselves. 2 weeks later, the second offer came. Slightly higher. Still below what my father believed the house deserved. That word matters. Deserve has nothing to do with market value, but people cling to it anyway. It makes loss feel like injustice instead of timing. Evan called me after the second offer. "They're hesitating," he said. "Expected," I replied. "You can force the sale." "I know." Pause. "Do you want to?" That was the question. Not legal, not financial, personal. I thought about it. About the table, the slap, the laugh, the call, the filing, everything that followed. "Yes," I said. That was decision 17. Force resolution, not wait for agreement. The third offer came in the following week. Not dramatically better, just acceptable. That's the word that ends most things. Not perfect, not ideal, acceptable. They accepted. Paperwork moved. Signatures were scheduled. Not at the house, at an office, neutral ground. That mattered, because the house had stopped being neutral a long time ago. We sat across from each other, not at a dining table, at a conference table. Different lighting, different air. Same people. No one mentioned the slap. No one mentioned the laugh. No one mentioned the call. That's how legal processes work. They remove the story, leave only the structure. Sign here, the agent said. One by one, pages turned, pens moved, names written, ownership dissolved. Not emotionally, formally. When it was my turn, I didn't hesitate. That mattered. Because hesitation looks like doubt, and I didn't have any left. That was decision 18. Complete the separation. We walked out at the same time, different directions. No conversation, no closure, no performance. That's how real endings work. They don't announce themselves. They just stop. They kept talking after that, not to me, about me. I heard pieces of it, indirectly, through people who thought they were helping. You went too far. You could have handled it differently. You didn't have to make it legal. Every sentence had the same structure, not questioning the action, questioning the response. That's how systems protect themselves. They don't deny what happened. They redefine what should have followed. I didn't respond. That was decision 19. Let the narrative exist without correction. Because correction feeds it. Silence starves it. The numbers worked out. That part was clean. My share came through. Accounts separated, assets divided, structure achieved. But structure isn't the whole cost. There are things you don't see on paper. Calls that don't come anymore. Holidays that don't exist in the same way. Rooms you don't enter again. People who stop being part of your daily calculations. That's the real cost. Not the house, the access. I didn't try to get it back. That was decision 20, because you can't rebuild something on top of a structure you already proved was unstable. Months passed. Work stabilized. Then improved. Then became something I didn't have to defend every time I explained it. That part mattered, not for them, for me. Because independence isn't proven by success. It's proven by consistency. And consistency takes time. The first time I realized I wasn't checking my phone before opening my banking app, I knew something had shifted. The first time I paid a full month of expenses without calculating what would break if something slipped, I knew something had held. The first time I heard my own name in a room that had nothing to do with my family, and it meant something on its own. I knew the separation had worked. My father called once, months later. I answered, not immediately, but I answered. "How are you?" he asked. Not "come back," not "let's fix this," just "how are you?" "I'm fine," I said. Pause, then, "Good." That was it. No repair, no resolution, just acknowledgement. Sometimes that's all that remains. The slap didn't define what happened. The laugh didn't either. The decision did, because everything after that came from it. They thought I would react. I chose to separate and made it permanent.